This is Justin Fields, a league winner. That and more this week on the couch. Davis Mattek. You know, so much of fantasy football is just geeking out about players. Let's geek out about Justin Fields.
Let's do it. Can't wait.
Yeah. So is he going to win leagues? Is this real, what we're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any quarterback that runs as much as Justin Fields has been running is like, it kind of is the passing stuff is icing on the cake. And the big difference in fantasy football now from even 5 years ago is the quarterbacks who are running a lot are also adding a ton of passing stats. I mean, look at ADP this year, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, all those guys, they're all really good passers too. And Fields has always, I mean, it's not as if he wasn't running at all to start the year. 11 rushes in the first week, rushing touchdown in game 2, 47 rushing yards against Houston. But what has changed the last month of the season is he's also been adding a little bit more passing efficiency. And, I mean, to be clear, he is also very like kind of 2019 Lamar-esque in the sense of those 20-yard runs have, instead of 20-yard runs, been 50-yard rushing touchdowns. And they're like, I don't want to lie to people. Like, there are going to be a couple weeks where you get ready to start Justin Fields and he does not, the safety just happens to shoestring him or whatever. And you're going to be stuck looking at 12 fantasy points instead of 22. But yeah, it's all happening with Justin Fields, I think.
It is. And the way that we had a pretty good idea, Davis, that it was happening was that he did it against New England and Dallas. Like Monday night game, we thought, well, this is going to be just embarrassing. You're going to feel bad for Justin Fields. No, the opposite, actually, just the opposite. And then, Dallas. And now, granted, some of this is Chicago's defense. And, this is great for fantasy. They trade away their 2 best front 7 players. So now they're going to get into these high scoring games. Although some of this is we can unpack Miami and what's going on with Miami. But good question in the chat room, because we always want to take it back to actionable information, right? Right, Davis? So someone asked, Burrow or Fields? So how aggressive should we be?
Fields.
Okay, good. So maybe here's the easier way to put it. Other than Patrick Mahomes, let's just step through it. So we can do a whole tangent here on Josh Allen, and we're still in limbo right now. We know that he has a UCL injury. That's basically what we can say, right? So first of all, would you say if you have Patrick Mahomes, you're fine? You shouldn't be thinking about trading high. You shouldn't be thinking about making a lateral move to Justin Fields and trying to get something else. Is there a quarterback that you're not trying to turn into Justin Fields?
I mean, I guess pending, like assuming that Josh Allen maybe misses a game or maybe no games or whatever. I think Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, Lamar, those are the guys I'm for sure saying I'm good at quarterback.
You're good.
I don't need to make any.
I wonder.
Adjustments.
Yeah, go ahead. I wonder
just those are the guys.
Right. And Burrow is an interesting one because you just had and this is just the nature of the NFL this year, right? Like I compared it to that film Awakenings. The Panthers woke up for 2 weeks. I guess playing Tom Brady. I think playing Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, players still get up for. No matter what the context is in their season, if they know they're facing Brady or Rodgers, like it is a real thing that there are quarterbacks that players, defensive players especially, love to defeat. Like they love to beat them. They live for it. And I wonder if that's what revived the Panthers. And then you saw that game against Atlanta. They're going to play Atlanta again this week. But against Cincinnati, they went back to sleep, right? Like they threw the Panthers the meat that had the tranquilizers in it. So the unpredictable week-to-week nature of all this stuff. But Burrow, while he did have that big game, you are seeing without Jamar Chase, that is a less exciting offense. It was a Joe Mixon offense, actually, in that game. And we'll see when Chase is back, and we'll see how effective he is. I mean, certainly it's something that could be rewarded because you look ahead, and this is the thing with Justin Fields, Davis, because we're to the point in the season where we can look at the schedule and have a pretty good idea what we have here, right? Schedule actually matters. Week 14, he's on a bye. Week 15, he's playing Philadelphia. And week 16, he's playing Buffalo. And those games are in Chicago. So the likelihood of bad weather is higher, at least, than other places. I think if you look at Deshaun Watson's schedule, that should play into your analysis of him too. So let me ask you this. Let's assume that he stays not in the 40-point range like he was, but in that, because the matchups until then are manageable, right? Detroit, manageable. Right. I mean, manageable. Geez, if he doesn't put up 25 points against Detroit, you're sad. Atlanta, let's see if A.J. Terrell's back. But still, like you said, these big runs are turning into big fantasy days. The Jets might be a real limiting factor for offenses going forward. And then you have right before the bye in week 13, you're going to have Green Bay, which you'll probably go with. So let's assume that he still stays around like 25 points on average in those games, right? Maybe he has like a 35-point game against Detroit, maybe a 20-point game mixed in there against Green Bay. Coming out of the bye, you're going to play him against Philadelphia. Are you planning on playing him against Buffalo? Or is the answer here like you have Justin Fields, but let's have a quarterback like a Kirk Cousins or somebody that you hand it off to for those games?
My guess would be that if you have Fields, you're probably set up in such a way. I mean, his cost to acquire was so cheap. Right. My guess would be is that it's just kind of it's found money at this point. Either you picked him up off waivers after someone else dropped him. Maybe he was your second quarterback. Even in like the FFPC stuff, 20-man rosters. A lot of people are not drafting two quarterbacks. Like, right. We've been, I had a bunch of teams with Dak who got hurt, Lance who got hurt, and honestly should have picked up more Justin Fields and didn't. I would probably still just start him because you're gonna feel way dumber if he runs for 2 touchdowns against the Bills than if you're like, oh yeah, I picked up quarterback X, Y, or Z, or I have Derek Carr, or I have Kirk Cousins or whoever, and those guys get 12, and you're like, well, yeah, obviously Kirk Cousins gets 12 sometimes because he's Kirk Cousins, and that's just well within his range of outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And obviously, if he continues to do this, I shouldn't downplay the idea of him being a 25-point fantasy quarterback over the next 4 weeks because that's elite this year. Newsflash, quarterback scoring is down. Scoring is down. Fantasy scoring is down, right? This has been a depressing year. If you've been playing fantasy football for a while, well, you can correct me, Davis. Let's go real on the couch here, right? How are you feeling during this fantasy season? How are you feeling about as an analyst, as a player? How's it been treating you?
It's been horrible, honestly. It really has been. It's really been, honestly, I got such a major inflection point wrong this offseason that there's no way to come back from it,
That's not true.
If you don't have Kenneth Walker on a big portion of your teams, you're probably not gonna because I'm playing in all these contests where the goal is to win $1 million.
Oh, right? The best out of 1,000 teams or 10,000 teams.
Yeah. Right. Win the main event, win the underdog championship, and I just was not taking Kenneth Walker at all. And you're just gonna have to have him. And even more than that, I've got a home league with my buddies for 15 years or whatever, and I was so in on the Broncos. I was so in on Russell Wilson with the Broncos, and so out on the Seahawks, and probably like the 3 biggest values in fantasy football have all been Seahawks, right? Walker, Metcalf, and Lockett. They've all been unbelievable.
Geno can save you a quarterback. If you picked up Geno, like you're 100%. Breathing, you have a pulse at least.
100%. Yeah. If you lost Trey Lance and you picked up Geno, unfortunately, I picked up Jared Goff on a lot of the teams where I lost Trey Lance because they started out so strong. Goff has really tailed off, so missed out on that. I mean, it's just been we have been scraping and clawing on a lot of my teams to stay alive, and it's been such a slog.
I hear you on the idea of the big field tournaments, that there's a couple of players that if you weren't in on those players, Justin Fields might end up being one of them, right? If you weren't in on those guys, then boy, are you hurting. Now we can look at the real movers and shakers in fantasy have mostly been players drafted to do that, but you're right to and Travis Etienne's probably another one. But what does all this stuff stand for? If we're going to really try to take a lesson out of this, starting with Justin Fields, Davis, things change. Things change. First of all, things change. Justin Fields can look like a mess and be droppable for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year. And we could say like even going to a different offensive coordinator, it's too much deficiency of personnel around him. We can say all this is happening for all these reasons. But the game can slow down for Justin Fields. What did Justin Fields say? They took plays out of the Lamar Jackson playbook. They watched the Lamar Jackson. And then, like you said, in the 2019 Lamar Jackson fashion, it's going to be more boom bust, but you're going to get the drop on defenses, at least for a little bit. At least for a little bit with design runs at the goal line. Design runs for the quarterback at the goal line shouldn't look as easy as they've looked, right? I think it's just preparation and understanding what they have to be prepared for. They had Chase Claypool. That's a shot in the arm. The bad defense is a shot in the arm. And then the other lesson to take away here when we talk about Russell Wilson and how many things in fantasy football hinge on your narrative about Russell Wilson. And by the way, the problem isn't having a narrative. If you don't have a narrative, how do you even start in fantasy football? Unless you're just going to like strictly look at the numbers, like telemetry from a space mission or something. You start with some basic understanding of what has happened to this point and why, right? And it was conventional wisdom that Russell Wilson was actually being held back by the Seattle offense and not a limiting factor when what we've seen is just the opposite, right? And you even have, again, anecdotal evidence whenever they ask Pete Carroll, they ask him a question basically like comparing and contrasting Geno and Russell Wilson. He said, Geno does what we tell him to do or something along those lines. Like Geno does what he's supposed to. Geno does what's on the paper, and look how much of a difference it can make. And Kenneth Walker, there's another thing too, Davis, that it also feels like being committed to the run. And what I mean by that is not just how many times you're going to run the ball or how much you pay your running back, but I actually think it's about preparing. And I know Kansas City stands out as a counterexample, and Buffalo too. But a lot of the teams that have surprised us are the teams that have said, most of all, even sometimes to make fantasy players like us go crazy, we're going to keep running the ball. We're going to keep running the ball, and we're going to make it the hallmark of what we do. And I think that Seattle having that kind of mentality has helped, because what was the take on Kenneth Walker? It doesn't matter. Even if Rashad Penny goes down, it doesn't matter because it's going to be a really bad offense. And we've seen that in some of these offenses, but then some of the other offenses, like the Jets, are another good example. The Jets can, with their defense and their backfield, even without Breece Hall, who was also going to be a league winner. Sorry for all the Breece Hall people. That was going to be another one of those key players.
Totally. He really was.
So rookies, we're back all the way around to rookies. Rookie running backs have disappointed so much, but in the last couple of years, they've been really important picks. So things can change, and we can have things really wrong, like really, really wrong, like the opposite of what they actually are. It's a weird election day message there, right? But we have to be open to change. And you're right that in those big field tournaments, it's too late. It's too late. Like the decisions that determine whether you won or lost the league aren't waiver wire and trades. They're the decisions you made in your draft. But for everybody else, there absolutely is still time.
Yeah, there's still time. And I mean, think at this point last year, we didn't know who Amon-Ra St. Brown was. I don't even know. He might have not even been active for a game at this point. I think Cordarrelle Patterson was like the running back 4 at this point last year. I mean, there's lots left to be discovered. Honestly, I do think one of the things in the end, it's going to be teams that picked first or second and then didn't take Jonathan Taylor are going to be at a huge advantage.
Yes.
Because a lot of those guys, you could get Mark Andrews at the turn. You could get A.J. Brown at the 2-3 turn. Mm-hmm. Like the teams that just avoided Jonathan Taylor at that spot feels like, and there were a lot of really good picks at the 4-5 turn as well. Some huge landmines at that 4-5 turn as well. But it does feel like this year, as long as you held the door, and just for when McCaffrey's healthy, guy scores 25 points a game, I'm just taking him. Feels like you're really getting paid for that decision this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And having just even the tiniest little bit of Jonathan Taylor skepticism absolutely has been rewarded. Although you were right for the wrong reasons. You didn't say I'm avoiding Jonathan Taylor because the Colts
organization, I think he's going to be bad.
Yeah. And because the Colts organization is going to have a complete meltdown during the season. I mean, he's part of that story, but I'm just saying, like, it's one of the most spectacular busts at number 1 that we've seen. I can't remember another player going number 1 that is not strictly injury related, because it wasn't like he was doing a lot. And what's interesting about that, Davis, is from a trading standpoint, and I nudge this a little bit. I'm happy to bring up a lot of things I'm wrong about too. But even after Jonathan Taylor was inactive last week and was announced on Friday, so there's still some sell low. It's sell lower, but it's still sell low because as the number 1, number 2 overall pick, if you could even get 25 cents on the dollar, you did well. Even now, what can you get? 10 cents on
Drake
the dollar.
London, you get
Right,
Drake London
a player that you're equally disgusted with, right? I mean,
right.
that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like now you're at least a week last Saturday, you might have been able to get, Damian Pierce. People were asking me that question in the chat room, like, would you rather have Pierce or Taylor? And I think we decided at that time still Pierce, because Taylor was a classic falling knife. So you're right, that was one of the big decisions. But there's always new information, new data, and it's always actionable, and it's always good, like you say, to take then back a big picture look. One of the things I continue to be obsessed with is, by every way that you can measure it, Miami's pass offense is breaking football. It's just absolutely, this is the thing, like, outliers happen. And I have a feeling this a lesson too for the reality we're going into in the year 2022, Davis. Not only will outliers happen, outliers might become the norm. How does that work? That we're going to continue to see things that we haven't seen before. And by a lot of different metrics, the Miami pass offense is way outside of the range of what had happened before in the NFL. And obviously predicting that, or sticking your neck out for it in fantasy drafts, has been greatly rewarded. So give me an example. I'll tie this all up like this, Davis. Well, our brain cells are all popping, right? Give me an example of something else you think that we might see change in the second half of the season, or something we might realize we were wrong because of, certain players come back from injury, or, Deshaun Watson comes back, or something that's going to happen in the second half of the season that is going to be an equal sea change, where you are, how much faith you were, how much of a skeptic you were, is going to matter.
Well, one thing that I think we got to be tuned into is Jerick McKinnon returning to the role that he had for the Chiefs in the postseason last year. The sledding was pretty tough against the Titans, and what they ended up doing in the second half was just saying, Pacheco, like Isaiah Pacheco, I don't think has ever found a hole in his life. Look, the fact that this guy averaged 3.9 yards per carry at Rutgers is looking like a minor miracle that he, and people were excited about him. And I got him on some teams. I spent some fab on him, really looking like one of the worst. Like, guy cannot run at the NFL level. And then Clyde is like, Clyde is just a guy. I mean, he is do the Chiefs need to cut him? Do they need to phase him out entirely? No. But I think if the Chiefs are going to try and win the Super Bowl again, just the guy who makes the most sense in that offense is Jerick McKinnon. And he's still out there in quite a fair few number of leagues, because they've been playing all three guys. I mean, what do we talk about for fantasy? Like, if a team's playing two guys, it's fine. When they get to three guys, it becomes pretty intolerable. So I think you just cut Pacheco. I mean, assumption of rational coaching will kill you, although Andy Reid generally sticks closer to the plane of rationality than most. I think if Pacheco gets cut out of the rotation entirely, and then Clyde is playing on some early downs and some goal line stuff, but anytime the offense needs to get up and gallop, they just put McKinnon in there. I could see McKinnon being like an 11, 12 fantasy point per game guy the back half of the season. And I mean, everyone's desperate for running back points. So that's one. And I also wonder if the Broncos had their bye week. I wonder if they can figure out something. Because and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's more play action, or playing Hamler more, or
Russ cooking.
I mean, I think Russ,
cooking poorly, serving something that you may poke with your fork and say, "Do I want to eat this?" But the point is that now that he's healthier, that thing that we thought that was being held back in Seattle, showing back up on the field at least occasionally.
How about Russ learning to use the microwave? Right?
Yeah, right.
Let's go there, because well, also, we were talking about the Seattle guys earlier. I wonder if one of the things is we actually really underrated just how good Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are, and Sutton and Judy are just not.
Well, and drafting two rookie tackles. Remember that they've been starting two rookie tackles. So if you were projecting the Seattle offensive line, you aren't going to project Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas to be a good set of starting tackles right away. Like, usually even the guys drafted in the top 10 aren't good right away.
And knowing that Russell Wilson is a guy who's a little bit more sensitive to offensive line quality because he's so bad at taking sacks.
Yeah.
He's one of the worst, quote unquote elite quarterbacks. Like the same problem Joe Burrow has. Joe Burrow takes way too many sacks. Russell Wilson kind of has that same issue. But yeah, I mean, and maybe that's more wish casting than anything else. But it would be really nice to see a fully operational, Denver offense.
Yeah, well, you're right to bring up, and I like the McKinnon call simply because of this. I was exploring on our waiver wire show earlier today, Davis. I was probing at like Trent Sherfield, right? I was making a pretty big endorsement for Jeff Wilson, like emptying a lot of what you have left for Jeff Wilson if he's on the waiver wire. And I even stumped a little bit for Naeem Hines because you want to be attached to these offenses that create overachievers. You want to be attached to efficient offenses. You want to be attached to explosive offenses. And whatever we estimate, and again, what's one of the things that we talked about? Wow, our estimations can be way off, right? If there's a lesson here to take away as analysts, like you and I, talking to the other analysts out there listening right now, Davis, it's like that we should be more open to being wrong. We should be running in the simulation. What about the simulation where we're totally wrong about something? How does that look? Because I said this at the beginning of the season, I always compared it to the offensive lineman who recovers the fumble, because then you're ready to react first before the people are just like, well, I want to see a little bit more evidence before I trust that this is a true outlier. But I think that you want to get attached to these offenses: Dallas, Philadelphia, Buffalo, Kansas City. David, it's the same conversation of who are the best quarterbacks, basically, right? It's all those. It's very similar conversation. And then you bring up what offenses could get it figured out the same way Chicago's kind of getting it figured out. And certainly we look to the veteran quarterbacks, right? Denver, Tampa, Green Bay, like one of them is going to kind of.
It's not going to be Green Bay. I'll go ahead and put that on the record right now. Green Bay will go the other direction. I think we are at this point right now more likely to see Jordan Love starting games than Green Bay Packers, wide receivers and Aaron Rodgers, returning to be a guy you're starting in fantasy. If I was going to bet on one of these veteran offenses really returning to prominence, it would probably be the Buccaneers, who could be really unlocked if they just stopped running on first down. They are 32 at 32 in success rate on first downs, but they're top 5 in the league in first down run rate, top 5 in the league in second and long run rate. It's like every drive they're just doing run, pass, punt. And I mean, Bowles and Leftwich don't care. Like that,
right. If Bruce Arians was still the head coach, would we even be having this conversation? Probably.
Yeah. Like what was it? Leftwich said the other day, or Bowles said he didn't know what EPA was. And then I can't remember if it was Bowles or Leftwich that was saying like, yeah, we have to keep running the ball because we want to do play action, and the defense won't bite on play action unless we run it on first down. So, but maybe Brady, right? Brady carries a lot of sway in that building, and maybe he just looks them in their eyes and says, you know what, I'm the captain now. We're running. We're doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that could happen.
Well, that's a question, right? Tyler Dunn was on the couch last week, and he brought up that, hey, obviously, LaFleur, I brought this up so many times, Davis. The Green Bay offense should look like the Jets offense, right? It should run through the backfield. It should start with the running game because that's the strengths of the offense, and it's away from the weaknesses of the quarterback in the case of the Jets, and the wide receivers in the case of the Green Bay Packers. You're making the success of the plays hinge on your best players, right? That seems like it should be elementary. And with Tampa, but with the running game, you're not making it hinge on your best players, especially because the offensive line took so many hits before the season. Always offensive line. When you tell the story of why the things that mattered in fantasy football happened, offensive line is almost always part of that story. Always. But you're right to bring up Denver as a team that Denver in reality. So Denver probably has been performing at the lower end of their range of expectations. But we have now recalibrated to think, well, that's the mean expectation. We'll see. A healthier Russell Wilson, a chance to breathe, relax a little bit, reflect during the bye week. You never know. You never know what it's going to bring. Let's go back to the Josh Allen news real quick, because it is something. I mean, there is a valid answer that says just don't do anything. Hold on to all your positions in Bills players. Hold on to Josh Allen. Don't make any trades. Don't do anything to anticipate this materially changing what's going to happen out. And you can say that's where you're at on it. Otherwise, is there something to be done here? Are we getting out? Are we taking advantage of this pause where there's pessimism to try to get in? Are we worried? I mean, we have seen the the Miami and Jets defenses humble this what looked like such a great offense, right? Baltimore, I mean, the Buffalo offense hasn't been what we thought it was going to be when we saw them. Is Buffalo a warm weather team? What do we do with this Josh Allen news?
Well, you might really be asking the wrong person, because I've been on Josh Allen coming in, I was one of the people who was like, what are the Bills doing? Right? This is horrible. Then when I saw him start to run a little bit, the cannon, I was like, okay, the market's a little bit too low on this guy. Drafted a ton of him the year they got Diggs, was all on board. And then now find myself being on the other side of being like, we all got a little too excited about the Josh Allen experience. I mean, for how great Josh Allen is, and I'm not trying to say that Josh Allen is not great. He's incredibly fun on the football field. He can sit on his knees and throw the ball out of the stadium and everything. We are still talking about a guy with a career 7.2 YPA. Like the issue is that he's a little bit too loose with the ball. He like that first interception he threw against the Jets, that was like a Josh Rosen interception.
Brain fart.
But I'm not. But
Yeah.
Again, to the other hand, you don't want to take any of his license to just go be Josh Allen away from him, because clearly so much of what happens in that offense is just Josh Allen is like an improvisational genius. He trusts his arm to make any throw. You're not trying to take that away from him. But I do wonder. Oh, well, and the other thing is, I think a lot of people expected them to get good third wide receiver production, whether it be Crowder, McKenzie, Shakir, whoever, and they haven't. And Gabe Davis has also been a little bit worse. I mean, certainly a lot worse than I expected. I really thought he was going to flourish. And, they spent that second round pick on James Cook, and you're like, man, I don't know.
Next year, yeah.
What would this offense look like with George Pickens? What would this offense look like with
probably the same,
someone like that?
Well, they don't trust Cook. No, the only reason I say that, Davis, is because they don't trust Cook and they don't trust Shakir. Shakir looks like a player, but they don't trust him.
Yes, I agree.
This is why I think Nyheim Hines is a really interesting pickup in the same vein as Jerick McKinnon, where I like the way you said, like, the get up and gallop when the offense needs to get it done. That's the running back you want out on the field. You want the passing down back out on the field. And Nyheim Hines, again, I brought this up on the waiver wire show. If Josh Allen is limited by his elbow, that's shorter passing. I mean, that's Nyheim Hines. I mean, that's the guy that is going to feast in that short area of the field and be that check down when Josh Allen is in his improvisational mode. And I do think Josh Allen, unless they say that you can do major career-altering damage by playing with this injury, he's going to play.
Yeah, he's just going to play.
He's going to play. Now, he's going to alter. He knows his body, and he's going to alter what he does, and that could include a lot more Nyheim Hines, maybe some more Dawson Knox. But what defenses have been doing, Davis, appears, and this is like the Josh Allen experience. I will say this about the stat you cited, just in the interest of fairness. I almost wonder if it makes sense to even look at the year 1 and year 2 as an indicator anymore for him. Because
that's fair.
So when you do career average stats, it doesn't give you a picture of the quarterback he's become.
He was 6.8 last year. Now he was 6.8 in a year, and this is it's like, this goes both ways with the running quarterbacks. Like, people cite YPA as like not indicative for Jalen Hurts or Lamar, because on plenty of passes that would count as 0 yards for a Tom Brady or a Ben Roethlisberger or whatever. Lamar will just not throw the ball away. And he'll go run for 2 yards or whatever. And like, who's to say which is more damaging? And Allen was, led the NFL in yards per carry last year, scored 6 touchdowns. I just really what it is it's just, I'm such a Mahomes fan. And I got just got so upset with the conversation this offseason of, if I was starting a franchise, I'd take Josh Allen and Justin Herbert before it. And I've become one of these guys where, like, would anyone would ever dare say that Tom Brady is not the greatest man to ever put a jockstrap on? I've become one of those guys, but for Mahomes.
That's fair, and that's okay. And there's emotional attachment there, like geographical attachment, in addition to just your football sensibilities. And obviously, Mahomes and Andy Reid get to fly that flag this year because it's clear the value of Tyreek Hill. Isn't it interesting, right? That Tyreek Hill has indeed, and if he hadn't landed with Mike McDaniel, who knows? But Tyreek Hill is that important. I I mean, he does distort the field that much. Someone, I can't remember who it was, said basically he's the last time we saw this was Randy Moss, like a wide receiver that because he's on the field, the entire way that the defense plays changes, and you saw that in the last 13 seconds. Sorry, Buffalo fans. So we'll see. But what you're seeing with Josh Allen is earlier in the year, Davis, it seemed like he was able to function so efficiently, and what the offensive play calls and what he had to do against defenses, even when we go back to that game against the Rams in week 1, is he was really operating within like kind of take what the defense gives you. Like he didn't have to be improvisational. He didn't have to outlast the defense or be Houdini. The plays were working and his processor was working. And he always has had a fast processor and he's always been able to make good, quick decisions. And then his accuracy started to improve. And then you're seeing more like what happened to Lamar Jackson, like in year 2 or year 3, where defenses are pushing him to the limit of his abilities, which is kind of what he was in Wyoming, right? And everyone's like, he's trash. He's trash because he's taking the whole offense on his shoulders. He's basically on every play, like what Mahomes was when he was bad last year. Mahomes had his Wyoming Josh Allen period last year, right? Where someone put it like he was trying to score 21 points on every drive, And then when a quarterback is pressing like that, even a good quarterback, when he's pushed past the limit of his abilities, when he feels like he has to be at the limit of his abilities to function. This is what's good about what the Jets are doing with Zach Wilson. Did you notice that last week, Davis?
Yeah, he's playing. I mean, any play where Zach Wilson feels the need to put on a cape is like has potential to be the funniest
Iron that
play.
Out. Get it out of the playbook.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for Jets fans because they're getting such false hope right now, man. Like imagine. No, you can. If the Jets win 10 games this year and 9 games next year, and they pick up the 5th-year option on Zach Wilson,
well, that's a good point. Yeah,
that is not good for them because, and maybe Zach Wilson. I would say at this point, a really good outcome for Zach Wilson would be coming like this new generation's Ryan Fitzpatrick, where he's going to turn the ball over too much, but come in and just kind of make some things happen.
Yeah. Well, look.
He could be that guy, I guess.
Or even like Colin Kaepernick, a
Sure.
quarterback that with the offensive design, you really hem in what he's asked to do and the decisions he asked to make. But every now and then on a third down, he can escape. He could use that athleticism. He can do something that is unexpected, get the defense on, like what Kyler Murray does on every play, basically. Like get the defense on asymmetrical terms where now you can't, like whatever formation and scheme you call doesn't matter because you're outside of that realm. And like you said, bad things can happen. But if you only ask Zach Wilson to do that 2 or 3 times a game, and it's just to wriggle out on a 3rd and 13, but you're still winning games with your backfield, with mistake-free football, with field position, with defense. I think that they've rethought. But you're right to say that from a football standpoint, the scary thing for Jets fans is if they see the Jets win-loss record as a referendum on Zach Wilson as a franchise quarterback. And hopefully in-house, they know, like, if we're having to do all this stuff to make sure he doesn't influence the outcome of the game, then we already know,
Right.
So we'll see. But hats off to Robert Saleh. What's wild about this, Davis, I said this earlier on the Waiver Wire show, is that when we look at these upstarts, like the Jets, even the Falcons, right? You look at some of these teams, the Giants are another one. And I like how you say it's false hope, but usually these kind of stories peter out by week 5 or week 6, right? And this
the Giants just need one thing that's never happened in the history of the sport to happen once per game to keep them competitive in these games. Like in particular that the win against the Jaguars, it was like they needed like 7 things to happen in 5 minutes to get them to be
maybe the Titans too.
Well, yeah, I mean the Titans are an interesting.
It's Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, so Vrabel, I think a lot of people would think that someone like me, who's like all about passing and efficiency and stuff, would not like Mike Vrabel. I actually love Vrabel. I think he gets the absolute most out of every dude on his roster, and I actually think the front office has really done him a disservice because something a lot of people were saying was, Vrabel, he's an old guy, he's by the book, no way he goes to the young quarterback. I actually think if they had like good guys to throw the ball to, like if Burks was healthy and maybe they had signed, one of these guys in free agency, and maybe if they were the team that got Khalil Shakir in the 4th round, or if Kyle Phillips hadn't got banged up, I actually think he kind of would have let Malik try against the Chiefs. I really do. But I just think the offense is just very talentless is really the problem.
Yeah, they have one mode basically, and that's okay. I mean, you just see little flashes with Malik Willis, but Malik Willis does look like the definition of a quarterback that you want to have in the incubator for a year, maybe even 2 years, before you expose him.
Man, that the pass he made to Hooper in the red
Yeah,
zone, though,
yeah.
I was like, damn, I really did not think he had that in him.
Well, that's the story.
He would be, Nathan Peterman-esque if they were like, okay, you got to go throw the ball 40 times. But I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of teams that should have probably just taken that guy in the 2nd round and been like, you just learn, bro. You sit here and you learn because we think you have the tools.
Well, you have this blueprint with Seattle, with the Jets, Green Bay when they're good, and not so much this year. Tennessee, where passing the ball 20 or 25 times in a game is just fine as long as your defense can hold up their part of the bargain. You don't go out looking to pass the ball 30, 35, 40 times. But what you mentioned about Willis was the scouting report, right? Like he'll make a play that combines his athleticism, his arm talent, and just his daring do, his willingness to try things that will astound you. That like longtime football people will say, "Did you just see that?" But what is there as a foundation? And well, it's like you said, it looks like they don't want to trust him to do that. But they almost beat the Chiefs on the road with Malik Willis in. So Mike Vrabel and company are doing something right. And you can see the DNA in Atlanta too, right? It's almost like, hey, if you're going to get in a fight with me, I'm actually going to fight to the death. Like there's no point am I going to submit. And I think that spirit in teams, because what are we seeing with Indianapolis? Talk about the Jonathan Taylor bust. It's the opposite, right? Like at least Nyheim Hines got out of there. It's a sinking ship that's on fire right now. And certainly, Davis, I talk a lot about the mass psychological organism that a team is. There's like a shared psyche, and that absolutely influences the team. And the coach sets the person, the coach and the quarterback generally set the person. There are figures like Ray Lewis who have a strong personality that can enter in, but generally it's the coach and the quarterback. Whoever's the stronger of the two personalities that kind of determine that. And that's why it's so interesting to see these offenses like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady led offenses languishing right now. I feel like we got off the topic of how it's going and it's miserable. And I was trying to cheer you up a little bit, Davis. So for somebody that is saying it's been miserable for me too, what's our message to them right now?
I mean, probably it's just there's no scoring. I mean, that's really what the thing that's feeding all into it is that unders are hitting at like a 58, 59% clip. There's been no week this season where more overs have hit than unders. There's been a lot of injuries. I think one thing that's interesting is there were 0 season-ending preseason injuries to top 100 players. The guy with the highest ADP at time of injury who's out for the year was Tim Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that fed into the season. And I mean, I don't know. I've been jokingly telling our buddy Rich Rebard that the NFL just needs to ban the too high safety. Like the safeties can't be within 20 yards of each other, or there needs to be like a designated spot where the safeties have to be before the play. Because make no mistake about it, that is basically why we're getting what we're doing. Now, great quarterbacks, Mahomes and Allen and Lamar and Hurts, these guys can figure it out. And especially because all of those guys are attached to really good play callers and really good offensive coordinators. But if you give, Jared Goff 17 games against the too high safety, like and clearly it is short circuiting some of these guys' brains. They are not prepared for this defense. And an interesting thing, again, that people probably would not have predicted is there's been a higher relationship between rushing efficiency and winning in games this season than in any year for a long time, because like we're saying, if you're having Jared Goff drop back 50 times against the two high safeties and he just can't do anything, well, sometimes you just got to run. And so now, again, at the very, very, very high end, teams that are going to win the Super Bowl, the Eagles, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, it's not this conversation does not apply, but to the Jaguars winning their division, the Buccaneers winning their division, figuring out how to get 4 yards per carry instead of just pounding the ball into the turf, trying to get the ball to your slot wide receiver. But again, that's made the game worse for fantasy football because fantasy football has been exponentially more fun with teams throwing 60% of the time and having 3 viable pass catchers and 2 viable running backs, So we're just kind of entering into a different era of football right now.
Yeah, and again, this is why Justin Fields' blow up value is even amplified. I talked earlier this year about in terms of VBD, because scoring is down in general, Davis, in VBD, now the value of quarterbacks is even higher. That 30 point, 25, 30 point a game quarterback has even more value because the rest of the league has receded away from him, even though it's the same kind of scoring or even maybe slightly less than they've been putting up in the past. So and I think if we unpack anything actionable based on the discussion of scoring being down, it is that the margins are slimmer, so it's easier to flip it. It's easier to make a few moves. You pick up Elijah Mitchell this week and Christian McCaffrey goes down, perish the thought, or something like that. There's still a few more sea changes coming. There's still a few more plate tectonic shifts in fantasy football, and being ahead. Look at how some of these things happen, right? If James Robinson doesn't get traded, does Travis Etienne fully happen the way it has? Right?
I think he still would. I think Etienne's just so good.
It was coming. Yeah.
And Robinson, it was
still
masked by those long touchdown runs, but he was really inefficient.
And he can start getting those for the Jets.
Sure. Although Carter, I don't know. Every time I watch Michael Carter, I'm like, he's pretty good. Like he is.
The answer's both. The answer is actually both, Davis. And the reason the answer is both is, again, you can look at the schedule and have a handle on this stuff. Now, they play Detroit and Jacksonville in weeks 15 and 16. Ooh, boy. I just think that the Jets, especially with their defense, especially with the way Robert Saleh has them playing, it's the running backs. They're both solid plays last week, and I think you're going to continue to see that as a trend. And then you have Garrett Wilson, and it's fun. Like you said, you feel sorry for Jets fans with the possibility that this might.
No, I don't really, because this is probably the most fun they've had in their
lives. But if you're married to Zach Wilson, if you end up married to Zach Wilson, but we'll see. Transformation happens, things happen. But like, what's the best case scenario for Zach Wilson? Like, athletic Rex Grossman or something like that. So
sure,
yeah. And I guess Rex Grossman did make it to the Super Bowl. I guess there's so many different places and directions to go. It was actually a pretty quiet week on the waiver wire.
Horrible week on the waiver wire.
Basically, you're looking for players that might have been dropped on bye or something like that.
Yeah, the Zach Moss. If Jonathan Taylor just gets shut down for the year,
right?
I thought he was interesting.
I brought up like Trent Sherfield. Sure. Just like, again, under the theme of just try to get a piece of good offenses and see how things unwind. And so it is rough because you might look right now at what you have and kind of feel like that's what you're going to be riding for the rest of the season. It doesn't necessarily seem like the cavalry is coming at any of these positions. But what it does do is it puts the microscope on trying to be another step or two ahead of things. Like you said, Jerick McKinnon, I think that's exactly the right kind of move to bring up. I always have a lot of fun when you're on. I have fun with everybody, but maybe we'll just go. Before we go off the rails, I'll just ask you this. Is there anything else, like a burning thing on your mind, that you have the couch, the bully pulpit here, and you want to just tell the folks who took the time to listen that here's something that I'm on to that I think might help you?
I got one more. George Pickens probably got dropped in a fair few number of leagues, both because I think he had 0 points the game before the bye, and then the Steelers went into the bye. But they traded Claypool, and what do we always see? I guess we don't always see it, but there is a pretty meaningful difference in points per game for rookies, both in the first half of the season and the second half of the season, and then before the bye, and then after the bye. So the Steelers trade Claypool, and then they go into their bye, and maybe Pickett, who, to be honest, has probably been the worst quarterback in the NFL this year. But hey, I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up on Kenny Pickett. I look, if I was holding the candle for Zach Wilson this offseason. I drafted him a bunch in these best ball tournaments. Pickett is Pickett is a gamer. It's a good fit. It's a good fit with the coaching staff, good fit with the city, good fit with the organization. I'm not giving up on Kenny Pickett. Odds are it's probably not going to work out, but it might. And George Pickens. George Pickens was like my favorite guy in rookie drafts
Mm-hmm.
this last year. And I think we will see. I think we'll see a good post-buy bump for him.
Well, because at least Pickett will give him a chance. Pickett will give him a chance to make plays,
Yeah.
and that's what he does. Pickens, the high wire act, as I call it, from the preseason, it's translated, and Pickett isn't good. I just have this nightmare as a Steelers fan, Davis, that because they took Pickett, then if they have a chance to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks next year, they'll say, no, we need to give Pickett more time because you don't get many chances to do that. We'll see. But again, this isn't about it is on the couch, but everybody knows I'm a neurotic Steelers fan. Okay, here's where I want to go with the off the rails. Because I love your enthusiasm. I love your enthusiasm. Davis, I know you're enthusiastic about the World Cup. It's going to be weird. It's going to be the weirdest World Cup for sure.
Oh, so many different things make it the weirdest World Cup of all time. But yes, it is going to be a strange experience.
So here's our challenge for somebody listening right now, because I love the World Cup. I can remember all the way back to, I think the first time that the World Cup really grabbed me, and for the few international soccer people that might remember, was when Cameroon almost beat England. I think it was the round of 8. I went to extra time in Italy in 1990. And Roger Mila, the most amazing goal scorer at like timeliness, came in and put them ahead. And then Gary Lineker, the great all-time great, scored 2 for England, and that was that. But watching an African team make a run and just understanding the way that the World Cup is so big everywhere but here. It brings everything to a standstill. Like when a World Cup team is playing, it brings everything to a standstill. And it's this ultimate clash of like the spirit and history and character and everything. Like, they're really representing their country whenever and it's that great moment, and then you see these great contrasts in styles or what their team's special sauce is or individual players. So here, and I'm kind of already doing it, Davis, but for somebody who has never really gotten into the World Cup in international soccer and saying, okay, I'll give it a chance, other than the obvious angle, which I know is partly why you're excited, and maybe this is the answer, is the betting angle. Maybe that's just the answer. But still, like, why do we love fantasy football? Because it gives us an excuse to get obsessive and analytical
100%.
and learn. So maybe the answer is like, for somebody, it's like, okay, I'm game. I'll give it a shot. Where do they start?
So there are, I think, 2 things for an American viewer that make this probably the best World Cup to watch in some time. So the first thing is the United States actually qualified for it this time, but they're not bad. So when the U.S. teams have made it in the past, it's mostly been older guys, scrappy, very defensive, not really. I mean, I guess Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey were pretty exciting, but like
right. Underdogs, and you can see why, right?
Yes, but the current attacking group of guys they have, I believe in the first game that they do at the World Cup, I believe all the outfield players will be playing in Europe domestically, so no MLS players starting. That'll be the first time that's ever happened for the United States at a World Cup. And their group, pretty much they got to beat Wales. Right. I don't know if they will. Gareth Bale from Wales is my favorite soccer player. Wow. So I don't know.
Why is he your favorite?
So I started watching soccer in 2016, which was basically his best year for Real Madrid. And like, he just was, and I didn't want Messi to be my favorite player. I didn't want Ronaldo to be my favorite player.
Yeah.
Too conventional. And there's just something he doesn't like soccer that much, which he loves to golf, which I kind of liked about him, but he just is, he's just something about watching him play. He gallops, like the speed at which he operates is unbelievable. And I also love, when smaller nations qualify for the World Cup, but they have one truly unbelievable player, right? And that is the scenario, right? Where like, a lot of the guys playing on the Wales national team, they're in the minor leagues of European soccer basically, but Gareth Bale's there, a billionaire, and he's just kind of living the life with his lads. So I like that angle. If the U.S. wins, I think that'll be great. I have real problems with the way the U.S. men's soccer team runs to like get talent to the team. It's if parents are listening to this, they know, like, if your kid plays on a traveling soccer team, how expensive is that for you? And the whole system just operates that way. But the other reason that might make this one of the most memorable World Cups ever is that this is Messi and Ronaldo's final World Cup. Messi is 34, Ronaldo is 36, and Messi has a real chance to win it. And I think if he does, it would basically be the moment of like, this guy might be the greatest athlete the world has ever seen in any sport. And it would, it just even thinking about it kind of gives me the chills. That's going to be the thing I'm monitoring the most.
Yeah, it is about the individual players. I mean, it's sad. What's his name? The Norwegian Erling Haaland.
Erling Haaland. Oh man, I think that FIFA should honestly intercede and just stick Norway in to this world, or just give him like a French passport or something, because the world needs to know about this guy. I have never. I mean, this guy is the most dominant athlete I've ever seen over a short stretch, ever.
Yeah. There's just certain players that are captivating. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Here's the challenge of getting into international soccer. There's no scoring, right? There's just no scoring.
It's much worse than club soccer. I would tell. One of our buddies. Oh, I forget. Dolan.
Joe Dolan.
Joe Dolan. Joe Dolan tweeted this yesterday. He tweeted out, he's like, for soccer people, how do clubs compare to countries in terms of skill level? And unfortunately, the national teams are much worse because they don't get to practice.
Exactly.
But all.
That adds intrigue, right? That adds intrigue because what binds them together?
More about individual brilliance is what ends up really deciding a lot of these games.
Well, and a team coming together. I mean, something happening, It can be a lot of different things that cause it. Like I'm remembering like the Euro in 2020 in Denmark and everything that happened with Denmark, how they played so far above.
Incredible. Yeah.
Like they found whenever their best player basically had a heart attack on the field. How can you even imagine stories like this? Their best player has a heart attack on the field, and then they just play out of their minds after that. And in that game, the officials, the FIFA, here's headline: FIFA's messes everything up, right? I mean, that's part of the story too. But that's part of the story. I mean, in some ways, that's part of what goes back to why this is such a weird World Cup. A World Cup in November in Qatar. No comment. But for the challenge of like it's boring, right? Soccer's boring because there's no scoring. And it's exacerbated, like you said, because these players don't play together most of the time. So it's choppy, and it's really about individual brilliance that tips the scales more than the cohesiveness. Although that's occasionally, you have some of the teams where not a lot of players are in the major leagues in Europe. So they do play together more often, and there is more of a sense, more anonymous players. I'm reminded when the Czech Republic won the 98 gold in hockey. They had like not that many important NHL players compared to Canada and Russia and the United States, but they still won the first because in some ways I think some of the cohesiveness. But the thing is, from a psychological standpoint, Davis, it makes it so that whenever there is a goal, it's almost orgasmic. It's like
it's incredible. Yeah,
the build up, the feeling, the cathartic feeling is just amazing.
Like, I mean, if Wales score against England, I mean, the whole country is going to erupt.
And that's why whenever, I mean, we have like, again, I'm reminded of the Czech Republic beating Russia. Well, that's heavy, in the
the politics of the U.S. men's group is amazing. United States, Iran, England, and Wales, just like the interplay of that is so bizarre.
So that's a layer, that's a hook, right? That's a hook. But I think that there is that when you do the investment and you watch an international soccer game with the importance of the World Cup. I mean, what we don't understand here is like scoring a goal in the World Cup for your country might make you a hero for the rest of your life. Like
you'll never have to.
Not a game winner. Not a game winner. Not even any
goal.
Just a goal. Like I scored a goal. I mean, you can watch one of the best. I would say the best 30 for 30 was the one about the Colombian soccer team and the two Escobars, Pablo Escobar, and getting and weaving all those threads the way that international soccer is so central in the consciousness of people not in the United States. So you get that, and it's that buildup, and where the respect comes in is it takes, like you said, Davis, it takes individual brilliance or a team play that is brilliant. I mean, what you hate to see in the World Cup is when it's because of a mistake, when it's just because of a lapse or an error. You want it to be the goals to be from greatness. And then you get momentum and you get these stories. I'm reminded of Iceland in the Euro. Like, what was that? Like 6 years ago or 10 years ago?
It was the 2016
2016.
Euros.
Yeah, where teams can just like if you like, here's a good hook for you folks. If you like the NCAA basketball tournament, if you love when a 15 seed pushes a 2 seed to the brink, and the 15 seed's never going to win the championship, but all along the way you get these amazing things. So real quick, since I got you, I'm sorry if I'm stealing, Pete. Give someone some betting. Give a betting tip. How are you going to ride with Davis if you're betting on the World Cup?
Well, I do really like Argentina.
Are you going to publish anything? Are you going to make any content about this?
Yeah, I did. So like, you guys can go find it on the TakeCast feed. I just went group by group with
awesome
Paul Villasmar. He's a big soccer better fantasy player guy, and we went through all the groups, which pretty good way to just get an idea of like who plays for who and what is there. Sure. In terms of like dark horses in the tournament, I do actually think Wales. It just feels too poetic to me. Like Gareth Bale, riding into the sunset. He's overplaying in the MLS. Like I think they're gonna beat the United States. I do. I think that's gonna happen. I do like in terms of like a little bit of an underdog story. There are a couple groups. I like Senegal to maybe potentially get past Ecuador in that group, and then Uruguay. One of the biggest dark horse stories. I mean, Uruguay is a nation of like 4 million people.
Do they still have those two forwards that have played together forever? Suarez, the biter.
They're so the one has been Edinson Cavani. The other one, he's been phased out. He's like 38, I think. But Luis Suarez will be there. The biter. He will be present in Qatar for the World Cup, and they're such good TV because they're just they're the blue collar team. They're the take the lunch pail type team. And I really, but the best thing about this World Cup is that it's going to be pretty unpredictable. It's happening in the middle of the season. A bunch of guys are hurt. The starting midfield for France, pretty clearly the best team in the world. Both of their starting midfielders are just out for the tournament, just not playing. May not end up mattering. France is like, if France could take a second team of guys who are all eligible to play, they still like that team might be the third best team in the world or whatever. They're really that good. But I think it's just going to be a crazy, like it would not surprise me if multiple really high profile players end up getting injured because they're playing a bunch of games back to back in the middle of winter when they're used to getting a rest.
Yeah, all bets are off. I mean, in the sense, so to speak, in the sense that we can't imagine what's one of those themes, outliers, and maybe outliers, like things outside of the range of things that happened before, are more usual. But hey, it keeps us in business, right, Davis? The stranger things are, the weirder it is, the more unpredictable it is, the more they at least look to us to say, yeah, that was weird. I felt that too. And it's, we continue to be in a meaningful way here in this world where our handshake is sports or fantasy or betting or whatever, present in each other's lives. And that's, I think, continues to be one of the themes and stories as we're on this verge of maybe seeing a big change in our community and how things go, or maybe not so big of a change. We'll see, but no matter what, we'll continue to be bringing you the best content, hanging out, enjoying time with each other, people like Davis, and with all of y'all. It's always a special thing that you take your precious time and attention and you give it to us, and hopefully we continue to deliver something good and compelling, because certainly the things we're talking about are compelling. You're the most compelling audience always to serve because you're so classy.